Hi, everyone. I'm Rejoice on Umatta Consulting Podcast. If today's your first time on our show, please make sure you subscribe to all of our social media channels, especially Spotify. Today, we have the special privilege of speaking with Dave. David is the founder and CEO of Chief Leadership Strategist and also the author of Simplicity Driven Leadership. I would love for him to also introduce himself as he sees fit, and we'll dive into more questions. So, Dave, the mic is yours, please.
Well, wonderful. Rejoice, thank you for having me on the show today. This is great. My name is David Liddell, and I founded the my company about 25 years ago. I've been around quite a bit in this space, and I'm just excited to be here. And I think as we chat a little bit more, you'll learn more about my background and what that's all about.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Our first question for you, David, you've spent over 3 decades helping leaders and organizations transform. What first inspired you to write Simplicity Driven Leadership?
Yes, it's an interesting question. Like I said, I've been in business for quite a long time, and what I noticed there's a pattern working with all different types of leaders, training them, coaching them, and leadership teams is that there's a tendency. It's not intentional, but a tendency to make things a little more complicated than they need to be. And with that and everything I've learned and just the stories and experiences, I thought, this might be a good time. I never thought about writing a book probably until the last few years. I never envisioned it. And I thought, there might be some real value in this and sharing my experience and turning it into a roadmap of sorts for people who want to learn and figure out how to navigate the challenges that we face every day in business.
Nice, nice. I like the concept of a roadmap, you having your experience for someone to sort of guide them and help them navigate all the challenges. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about the simplicity part in leadership and how it could be less of a burden for leaders. The title of your book suggests that simplicity is the heart of thriving businesses. Can you walk us through the 3 key principles of simplicity driven leadership?
Sure, absolutely. There are 3 pieces, and I'll explain them in more detail. But the first one is target. The second one is energized, and the third one is influence. And let me share a little bit about those. And I thought, if I'm going to write a book based on simplicity, I better keep it simple or as short and sweet as possible. So the target part of it is let's make sure we are clear as a company. It could be a company, a team, a division, whatever it is. Let's be clear about where we're headed, what we want to achieve, what do we stand for. It's all about setting direction because people want to follow. I mean, leaders, you would imply there's followers. So what am I following? Am I following blindly or do I have clear direction? And that's the target piece. So where are we going? The second piece is energize, and that is really connecting people to the direction, the strategy, the planning. What, do people see it? Do they feel part of it? I talk an awful lot with my clients and leaders about, do we want people to be in compliance because they have to do it, or committed to the plan? And it's more about a commitment, because not just because they're being told to do it, but because they want to do it. And then the third piece is influence. And the influence piece is all around accountability. Are we achieving the results we want to achieve? And I want to make a distinction on accountability. Some people think when I say accountability, it means I have to micromanage people, I have to hold them accountable. And that's not what I mean, even though that can happen sometimes. I'm talking more about building a culture of accountability. If people know where they're headed, what they need to achieve, how they're part of it, part of a plan or a team, or even for themselves, that makes it a lot easier to hold themselves accountable.
Amazing, amazing. I think that is so true. The commitment piece you shared is something that people want to happen naturally versus, compliance, and you're sort of restricted into the
Yeah,
role or the team. So thank you for sharing that. Which
absolutely.
of these principles, based on what you're sharing with us, do leaders struggle the most and why?
You know, uh, you think about that, and there's lots of things that people struggle with. But if I had to pick one that I see very commonly or as a root cause issue, it's the clarity piece making sure people are absolutely clear on expectations. And why that's a challenge. If people don't know what's expected of them, how do they know how to achieve? How do they know if they're doing a good job? And that's probably, and it's not intentional. What I see many leaders do is they think they're setting expectation. They try to set expectation, but what comes out of their mouth, or how they manage their day, or how they manage their employees and lead their employees, it doesn't necessarily translate into crystal clear expectations. So that's the big one. And if I could fix that one, I may not be in business, because that might fix everything. But if we get that one right, then everything else sort of falls into place.
Yes, very true, very true. And just for myself, being in HR for a couple of years now, it's
Yeah.
whenever there's an employee manager issue, there's always unneeded expectation or unmet understanding of expectation. So there's those miscommunications always happening. Is there a tip you can offer just for clarity that leaders can use to set clear expectations? Just curious.
Yes. I think first, and it depends what position you're in, but let's say, maybe CEO, VP, director, as you go down, let's make sure you're clear on what the results need to be. Or another way to say it is, what does success look like for our team
Mhm.
or for our company? What does it look like? How do we know? What can we look at, point to measure, to say, yes, that will tell us if we're successful or not. And so that's number one. And then number two is probably, okay, now that we understand that, let's connect people to that. Let's ensure that they see how their contribution makes a difference in achieving those goals. Now, that might sound overly simple, but if you're disciplined with it, if you persist at it, it makes a huge difference, because people then can self-correct along the way. If they're not making the grade, they'll know themselves. You won't have to micromanage them or get all over their case about it. They will take care. They will know. So those are I think that's a huge one right there.
I love that. I think that's great. Self correct, because we're working in an environment where you're working with adults, not children. So it's,
Right.
they know, people naturally know what they need to correct and so forth. So just a
Let's
little bit
hope
of an
so.
ah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that is
Let's hope
so
so.
true. That's very true. Very true. Good point there. So, David, let's move further into the conversation. Many leaders feel pressure to do it all. And I'm sure you've seen this, and
Mhm.
overcomplicate the process, as you shared earlier. How do we begin to strip away the noise and sort of focus on what truly matters?
Well, there is a lot of noise, or at least there's a lot of perceived noise. And I'm going to go back to what I said a moment ago about, let's make sure we're clear on what we need to accomplish. If we think about who our customers are, our external customers, if we think about our internal customers, we're delivering value along the way. So ultimately, our external customers get what they need. And if we understand that, and we say, okay, yeah, this is what we're delivering. This is this is what's unique to us. This is our promise. And if we think about it, both internal and external customers, then we can say, okay, to do that, looking at everything we do, what can we either strip away or add to what we're doing today? It's almost along the lines of a continuous improvement effort, because we always are. We're always trying to improve ourselves, our teams, and our company. But let's make sure that what we're doing is a straight line, or we're taking other things that aren't adding value. And that, I know that's not simple. It's not simple to be able to do that. But I think if you take the time to think about what are the things that aren't adding value, that piece right there, that makes it a whole lot easier.
Very true. Very true. And make it measurable to maybe whatever, metrics in your system or your company or your CEO or CFO is looking for. How can leaders balance simplicity with complex of, I guess, fast moving world that we're living in today? There's constant technology, constant change.
Yeah, there is. And I think we can all say that complexity is unavoidable. It's there. But I don't want people to confuse complexity with things being complicated. For me,
Mm,
complicated means, oh, I don't understand it. It's too difficult to understand. Where complexity is, yeah, there might be a lot of moving parts, and you have to be able to look at the complexity and say, okay, I think I understand it, or I do understand it. There's a lot to digest here. How do I navigate through that complexity? And
mm,
within an organization, there's many different departments. They're all interdependent upon one another. We have to achieve together, and that could be any size company, any size organization. So what you want to be able to do is say, all right, how do we navigate through that? And I think the simplicity component is like a compass. It says, all right, we see the complexity, and we're not trying to change that because that might be part of who we are or how we drive value. But within an organization, it's the leader's responsibility to know that what matters, who are we accountable to, how do I provide that value, how do I make sure I can leverage the right resources within the organization to achieve so that my internal customers and ultimately the external customer gets what they want or what we've promised them. So I would say use the complexity as a compass to get you there.
right. I actually think that flows very well with our next question, with regards to communication. What role does communication play in creating simplicity in leadership?
Well, you're in HR, so you know how critical communication is, and we all think we're really good at it. And communication is there's so much to it, right? There's the words, there's your body language, there's the context. Some of us are really good at listening, some of us are not, and there's a mix. And how we communicate, really, I think, if you think about creating the clarity, articulating your thoughts, getting your thoughts out of your head and out into the world so people can understand it and embrace it and buy into it is not as simple as we think it is. And part of the reason is we don't seek enough feedback. And feedback is
Mm,
part of the communication process. Is what I'm trying to articulate, share, are people getting it? And I think sometimes, and this oftentimes happens at the very top, because I hear this from my CEOs. They're going, well, I gave them the directive. I told them what I wanted. Yes, you told them once, and it may not have translated exactly the way you wanted it to. And so that's a big piece. So if we think about the clarity, are we articulating it the way, are people getting it? Are they understanding it? And that communication translates that clarity into the right action. So, and again, it's not I told you once, it's let's work together. Let's coach our people. Let's make sure we self-correct or we course correct along the way. And that communication also drives a lot of other things around making sure that people trust you, people respect you, that sort of thing. And those two things will come up later on, I think, in this conversation. They usually do.
yes, very true, very true. I completely agree with what you're saying about communication, the feedback piece, which sometimes get lost in the clutter of just trying to get actions, things executed, and so forth. But definitely great points on that. For some business owners or leaders or entrepreneurs, just standing out for one simple action that they could do to align their leadership with these principles. Do you have any
Yeah.
um, suggestions on?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm going to keep this kind of high level because when you get into the nuts and bolts of leadership, there isn't just one thing, but I would keep it kind of high level. And it goes back to one of the things I said earlier. Many companies do not have a plan. Um,
Mm,
Now they do, but it's rolling around the head of the CEO or a bunch of the executives, and they don't take the time to really think through who are we? What are we all about? What's unique about us? Why do we exist? What's our unique value? And then taking that and how do we want to compete in the market? Who's the ideal customer? What don't we want to do? What really carving out your specialization and that's part of doing some strategic planning work. But if you understand that, then the goal then is to make sure every single person in the company, every single person, I don't care if you're the CEO or the person mopping the floors, your role is critically important. We want you to understand, why we do what we do and understand how your contribution drives us forward. Like we can't do it with that. We don't hire people for no reason. We hire people for a very specific reason. And I think if we can make that connection, really connect people, do they feel connected to it? Do they feel like they know what they're doing every day, how it adds value to our business, to our clients, maybe to the community, whatever it means, but making sure people are connected to that.
Yes, yes, I agree. I love that you also took it from bottom up, from top down. Everyone needs to know the value proposition of the company.
Everybody, yes, I agree
Absolutely.
with that.
You
Yes,
know,
yes.
but is there a reason why some companies struggle with this? And is there a way they can improve or move the needle a little bit closer?
In terms of connecting people, is that the question? Yeah, I think there's probably a few things where people struggle with that. I don't. I think many organizations really don't know how to plan, and I don't mean
Mm.
that. I'm not trying to be super critical, but oftentimes when I'm invited in, they might have a plan, they might not. If they do, oftentimes it's on a shelf, dusty. It hasn't been looked at in a while, or it's in a P drive somewhere, dusty. Uh, and and so if you don't have a clear plan of any kind, and it's not, I mean, literally on paper, it doesn't do any good sitting in someone's head because that can change rapidly. We need that piece alone, and then we think, oh yeah, so we'll do a company wide meeting, we'll share it with everybody. No, it's got to go well beyond that. It's, yeah, that's a good idea, but then leaders in the business, managers, leaders, I don't care if you're a supervisor all the way up to the most senior level, you should be talking about that, connecting people to that during the day to day. It could be something you see, someone does something well, and it strikes one of the key values in the company, and you say, "That's exactly what we need." You recognize them for what they need, and that recognition, what you reward in terms of a verbal affirmation, people have a tendency to repeat. It's a human nature thing. So I think those are the big thing. If we kind of take it from the very top down to the just giving recognition where it's due, and we do find time to find to critique, to find the holes always, but we always have to improve. But if you don't find time to look, stop, smell the roses, say this is good, let's celebrate a win, even if it's small, then people feel like it's just an exercise and I'm not doing well enough. And we don't want that. We want both.
Exactly, exactly. Great points. I know you mentioned when companies bring you in, you assess sometimes their 5-year plan, 10-year plan. These
Mhm.
plans that are out there, outdated,
Sure.
and it needs to be improved. I'm just curious to also learn from you. Do you think the value proposition of the company should be assessed from the beginning, or maybe as they are maturing on the market, or as they are sort of celebrating anniversaries?
The value proposition in terms of what
Who
they
they
stand
are.
for and the value they provide. Yes. I think that's one of the first things you need to define. It really speaks to the why. Why are we in business? I oftentimes, and this is not a fault, but I oftentimes hear, and I think for the older generation, older than me even, because I meet a lot of founders, and like, why are you in business? And they'll say, well, to make money. Like, okay, hold on, that's and you don't want to be the guy in the room, the consultant in the room that says you're wrong, but sometimes you have to say, well, that's a result of why you're in business. If you do well at the why, like your value proposition, then the money just sort of follows you. It's like a vacuum; it just follows you. So let's make sure that we understand, why are we doing this? What value do we want to deliver? How are we going to make a difference? And I think that's got to be the first thing you think about. And you get a group of people. The founder might have an idea, the CEO might have an idea, an executive group. Engage more people in that conversation, and get them to think about it, get their opinions and ideas. Now it will have to come together, and because really what a value proposition or a mission statement, it says what you'll do and what you're not going to do. And it really narrows it down to that, what do we want to be the best at? So I would do that first. That's my opinion.
Makes sense. Great points. So we're going to also shift the conversations towards emerging leaders.
Yes.
You mentor emerging leaders. What common mistakes do you see them sort of making, and how can simplicity help avoid these pitfalls?
Yeah. You know, emerging leaders oftentimes are selected. You know, we want you to be a leader, or they're emerging in their space because they're really good at what they do. And, you know, oftentimes people are promoted. Hey, you're a wonderful employee, performing well. We're going to promote you now. And that's not always the best reason why to promote people. Someone in HR, you know that. But we do it because we want people to succeed. We want to grow organically. But I think what happens when you go from a doer, an individual contributor, you tend to have a tendency to hold things close and tight for fear that it's not going to be done as well as you can do it. I mean, there's a natural fear, or I don't trust people enough to do it well enough. And the simplicity piece where that comes in is I encourage, especially emerging leaders, is look at how you operate. Look, now you're not just doing, now you're managing and leading people. Look at the entire thing. Now let's think about it in terms of your structure, your people, your processes, your systems. Let's look at all the things that you can control. Make sure you understand them. Make sure you understand what's working and what's not. And then let's systematically align people with, you know, what you need to get the job done. But make sure you learn. And here's the key part: you need to delegate. Emerging leaders hold on way too tight and for too long, and then they become the bottleneck. I'll give you an example. Just the other day, it's a new company leadership development program working with the person who runs all of procurement for the company. And she said, I get 800 emails a day. And I said, how do you manage? And I said, no, you must be exaggerating. She said, no, 800 emails a day at least. I said, how can you manage that? And the end of the conversation was, well, not the end, somewhere in the middle. You're doing it wrong. There must be a problem here. We realized she was very apprehensive. Two things were going on: apprehensive to delegate for a few different reasons, but the business was running her. The tail's wagging the dog in a way, meaning there was so much incoming, and she didn't have a process, a structure where people could, kind of the onboarding of the requests, everything that she needed to do. She was just reacting to everything. I said, we've got to change that. You've got to learn how to delegate, and you've got to learn how to control the business because it is running you right now.
Which is not healthy in the long run.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
Makes sense. I also feel like oftentimes emerging leaders, they're so good at producing, but the leadership component, sometimes there's gaps. There are leadership gaps for them. And do you feel that the organization should take on this opportunity to coach, mentor, or find external companies to help them? Or should it be the individual person's responsibility to close the gaps?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I do, and this, being a leadership trainer, coach, and consultant, it's going to sound a little self-serving, but I do believe it is really incumbent upon the company to provide people the opportunity, and not because they just have to do it, because they need to. New leaders, they naturally know how to produce, they naturally know how to manage, but people need to be led. And some people are natural leaders, and they can, and some people are lifelong learners. They'll go get a book, they'll learn, they'll watch seminar, or they'll watch webinars, that sort of thing. But that's a small percentage. And even when we say to people, hey, look, you have access to this, you have access to that, go take a course, we'll pay for it. And most companies I work with have that. Okay, that's good. But again, then it's only a small population. So I encourage companies, even if it's, you do it once a year, every other year, or you just find a group of people, get them together. They'll learn to trust each other more. They'll learn faster. They'll develop a common leadership philosophy and methodology. So I really encourage it because it will accelerate their learning by far. I mean, just immensely. I mean, it's much, much faster. And in the long run, the benefits are huge. You take a company and you say, here's the price. Here's the price for a training program for 12 people. And they look at the number and they say, okay, well, yeah, we'll afford it. It seems like a lot, but we'll afford it. But then they realize year after year after year, it pays off, and they get a multiple on that initial investment in training their people. So it's never a bad investment For some, it's a leap of faith, but once they go through it, and especially for small companies, I always have the CEO in the room with us. We're training together. We get his whole leadership team. Then they realize, okay, this is making a huge difference.
Perfect. Well said. How does simplicity driven leadership impact company culture and employee engagement?
I like that one. I do a lot of work on culture, and the term engagement is really interesting. There are it's a Some people think engagement is something you do to an employee, and it's not. If you have a culture where people thrive in, you create a great environment that creates engaged employees. So good culture leads to engagement. So what I think about with culture is, all right, so where does culture come from? Well, culture is a function of the attitudes and beliefs and behaviors of all the people in the organization, but specifically the more senior leaders in the company. It
Right.
shapes the culture. So what do we want? Well, we want a place, and there's multiple factors, but one of the things in a culture, we want people to feel as though they have clarity in where the company's headed. They want confidence in their leadership. They want to know that they understand how they can be successful themselves. And that's where the simplicity comes in. If we can make that clear, that's a key element of the culture that leads to engagement. Now, there's other pieces of engagement, but the culture piece is, if I were to walk into an organization and say, well, what's it like to work here? And I were to go and interview a bunch of people and say, and then I would come back and say, okay, this is what I've learned about your business. This is your culture, regardless of what it says on the wall, that wallpaper over there, your values. This is the real culture. And that's when they can say, okay, well, we intend this, we need that. What do we need to do to change that? And I think the clarity, the clear part of what is it we need to do? How do I personally thrive in this business? If we can make that crystal clear, that's a huge part of that.
I think that is wonderful to hear because definitely helps new employees understand what's happening in the organization a lot. I think they tend to be more confused where what they read versus what they experience,
Yes.
especially when the company is growing and expanding to different locations and all of those things are happening. How do, David, in your viewpoint, what makes a leader memorable within their team?
There's probably many things, but the one that comes to mind for me, well, there's actually two things that combine. Those leaders who are trusted and respected, and getting there's a lot of things, but those who are perceived as trustworthy and have a lot of respect, I think are the ones that people remember the most. And that's not simple. And there's another thing here when I'm working with leaders and some of them are worried about being liked. I said, do not worry about that. Please don't worry about that. If people like you, that's okay. But first, they got to trust and respect you. Everything else, like you can overcome challenges more easily. You can give feedback more easily. You can be demanding when you need to and nice when you need to. But if people trust and respect you, everything else is simple. It's those that really struggle with that. Oh, I need to be liked. Well, let that be secondary. Uh, uh, you know, and getting that trust is oftentimes a function of how does the leader behave.
Right.
Do they create ambiguity? Do they create mistrust? It's oftentimes by accident, but that's where you need to have that self-awareness to, what's the perception I want people to get from my actions as a leader? And is it moving toward, and is it elevating trust and respect? And if it is, you're doing a great job. So I think that's a key piece right there.
I completely agree with you. Trust and respect is so important. And I mean, if someone doesn't like you, it doesn't diminish their ability to still work with you. Versus if they don't trust you,
Absolutely.
it's you have more problems than you think.
Well, it's funny. I had a boss many years ago. I was younger. I was an emerging leader, and our company got acquired. So I got a new boss. I love my old boss. I got a new boss, and boy, for the first 6 months of working with him, I despised him. I wanted to quit. I wanted to quit. I was ready to quit, but I thought, no, I'm not going to do this. Once I hit the 6 month mark, I understood him. I respected him. I didn't like him all the time, but I respected and trusted him all the time. And I knew he had my best interest. And I look
Mm,
back today, and this goes back, this goes back 40 years ago. I still remember him. And I would say he's probably one of the best bosses I had, even though I hated him in the beginning. So, and it's all because of the trust and respect I gained from him.
right,
Yeah.
right. But he's memorable. And
Very much so. Absolutely. Very, very. I remember his name. I remember what he looked like. I can remember his voice, the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that. Leadership is often talked about in terms of strategy and operations, as you know. How does simplicity expand to personal leadership and how leaders manage themselves?
Right. As a leader, you manage yourself first, people, others, teams, organizations. If you don't get the personal part, if you're not managing yourself well, uh, bad things can happen, and that's, I don't mean really bad things, but you might be off course. And what I subscribe and really encourage leaders to do. One of the first things I do when I coach people is I have them write a personal mission statement relative to their role in the company that says, give me your mission statement. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. I just want to understand it so I understand where you're going, and let's refine it together. And that's really critical. And it speaks to values, what they want to achieve, the, who they want to serve. And that's so important. So if you don't get your own personal values in place, it's really hard to then say, well, what perception do I want? Or what legacy do I, if you go like, okay, what legacy do I want to leave behind? Well, every behavior that's happening today leads to that legacy. Well, it's the same thing as saying, well, how do you want people to perceive you? And you have to think about your values, because if you have those values firmly in your mind, and that's the simplicity part, you don't want 27 values, you probably want a handful of like, these are the things that I think are really important. And you keep those in the back of your mind. Values lead to behaviors, and those behaviors will drive you forward, make you successful.
Great points. Great points. Let's shift towards small and large size organizations. As you mentioned earlier in your previous statements, you mentioned you have worked both in large organizations or corporations and smaller organizations. Does simplicity look different depending on the size of the business? And if so, how?
I would say on the surface, no, but in the organizations, yes. Big companies, large organizations become big for a reason. And some people, when they work for big companies, they sense a lot of red tape and takes forever to make a decision and everything else that goes with it. Approvals take forever. But those are the things that allow the company to scale and grow. Small companies have a hard time scaling when they don't have clarity in processes and systems and how they do things and how they make decisions and who does what. So in large organizations, simplicity for me is let's make sure we understand how we work together, where the resources are, the value chain in your business, because every department leads to the end result for the client, for the customer, and we have to know how that works. And if we can understand that, and that's where the simplicity comes in. I want leaders in big organizations to make sure people can navigate. Oftentimes, especially for a new employee, they don't know where to find things half the time, and it's kind of tribal knowledge. Big organizations tend to be a little more organized. So I think the simplicity there is making sure we know what the value chain looks like and how to navigate. In smaller organizations, for me, it boils down to discipline. The larger companies, we know they have discipline because they grew into a bigger company. Excluding those acquired through mergers, acquisitions, that's a little different, but they grew because they had discipline. The smaller organizations need to be disciplined to everything they define, and making sure, do we have goals? Do we have our values and our mission? Do we have clear alignment in what we do? Are we improving upon our business? Are we coaching and guiding people? Are we holding them accountable? really along the lines of target, energize, influence. Are we doing all those things? And it's the discipline to stick to that. So I would say that's the one. That's the kind of that is the differentiator.
Makes sense. Makes sense. David, how do you see leadership evolving over the next decade, and how does simplicity fits in?
Uh, yeah, I suppose as we go forward, the only thing we can count on these days, truly count on, other than taxes, is change. We know change is coming every day, right? And there's so many factors that lead to that. We're essentially a world economy in many respects. What can happen on one side of the world might affect us on this side of the world, and every organization is subject to a certain amount of change, and we have to be ready for that. And I think that's where leaders have to be resilient. And being ready for it isn't saying, well, I need to plan for the change because you don't know when it's come, but it's being mentally ready, being resilient, having the mindset that is like, no, I'm going to figure this out. We will work together to figure this out. You throw AI into the mix, right? And everyone's trying to figure out, what do we do with this? AI today is an infant. It really is. They're they just born not too long ago. And that's creating tremendous amount of change. And a lot of people are panicking, like, what do we do with this? And yes, it's going to change the landscape. So I think we got to think about it. We got to be prepared for it, meaning mentally prepared for it. The resilience is there, and just know that, have the confidence that we're going to overcome, because we always do. Humans overcome so much adversity. And so it's having that confidence and the determination, persistence to make sure we push through it. I also think, even though AI today is a huge disruptor, I think in time we'll get our arms around it a little better, and it's going to help us navigate some of the complexity, to help with the simplicity. I don't know exactly how that's going to work yet, because I don't, I'm a novice with AI today. I use it just a little bit, but I don't think it's going to blow things up. I think it's really just going to make it um, a little challenging for a while, and as time goes on, we'll figure it out. We'll conquer it.
Exactly, as we always do with many of the evolutions that human beings have been part of. So
Yes, absolutely.
thank you so much, David, for being part of our show today and sharing your book with us, your three principles. I think they have all been amazing. Do you have any last minute words? And also, where can people who want to read your book a little bit further dive in? Where should they go to find your book? And how should they connect with you if they would like to reach out to you?
Oh, great. Yeah, absolutely. So the book can be found on Amazon. It is there. It's hardcover, softcover, and it's also available on Kindle. So the ebook, so that's there. I don't know if you can see it. I have it here. This is kind of a pre-version. It's got the not for sale stamp on there, but I didn't have one of the newer ones. But it's on Amazon. You just look up Simplicity Driven Leadership, David Liddell, and you can find me at david@liddellconsulting.com. Pretty straightforward.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, we look forward to working with you. And for our guests listening, thank you for listening to us, and feel free to join us on our next show. Take
My
care.
pleasure.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you.